was made to kneel before the new Luna, until the throne moved and bent to her. The people whispered of the power that dwelled within their Luna, the ruler who wielded the throne made of night's very essence. To become Luna was to rise above all, to command the sky itself, bending stars to one's will. But the price for such power was steep, and only the strongest survived. For Alara, the road to this power had never been one of choice. She had been born into chains, bound by a curse so ancient that no one dared to speak of its origins. Her family had perished long ago, but their shadow still clung to her. Every morning, as dawn's first light barely touched the earth, she rose to serve the Luna not out of loyalty, but out of the grim reality of survival. Alara was not born of noble blood, nor was she a daughter of any great family. She was a mere orphan, lost and forgotten, until her fate was sealed by the curse that bound her to the throne. Her only role was to kneel, to obey the commands of the Luna, to be a servant in the grand palace, where the cold, silver light of the throne room touched every corner like a whisper. The Luna who ruled now was Selene, a woman whose power was as fierce as it was feared. She had risen to the throne through bloodshed and sacrifice, and no one dared question her authority. Selene was a ruler of darkness, the kind of queen who could silence entire armies with a mere thought, her eyes burning with the weight of her magic. Selene did not smile often, and when she did, it was as if the shadows themselves smiled with her. She wore her crown with the cold precision of a ruler who had learned to never show weakness. Her kingdom was a reflection of her, beautiful but dangerous, serene but oppressive. And Alara was nothing but a servant to that power. The first time Alara had met Selene, she had been nothing more than a shadow among many. Selene's eyes had passed over her like a cool breeze, disinterested and sharp. But there had been something in the way Alara's heart had raced when she had looked into those eyes. Something in the way the Luna's magic had seemed to stir in response to her presence. For weeks, Alara had tried to ignore the strange feeling that gripped her every time she was near the Luna. But it wasn't long before she realized that something inside her was different. Her curse, once a thing she had tried to hide, had begun to manifest in ways she didn't understand. She was a servant, yet her blood pulsed with a strange power, a power that seemed to call out to Selene, though neither spoke of it. It was during one of her many duties in the throne room that Alara first witnessed the true weight of Selene's power. She had been dusting the long, cold windows when a storm had begun to form outside. The wind howled, crashing against the palace walls, and the sky darkened, the stars vanishing beneath a blanket of black. "Alara," came Selene's voice, low and commanding. Alara's heart skipped a beat as she turned, finding the Luna standing near the throne, her dark eyes fixed on the sky. "Yes, your Majesty," Alara asked, her voice trembling just slightly. The Luna's eyes flickered to her, narrowing as if sensing something unspoken between them. For a moment the air seemed thick with tension. "The storm is growing stronger," Selene said, her voice calm despite the chaos outside. "But you will not be afraid." I am not afraid, your Majesty," Alara said, trying to steady her breath. Selene's lips curved into a faint, almost imperceptible smile. "Good, because you are bound to the storm just as I am. It is not your fear that binds you to this place, but your strength." Alara's heart pounded. What did she mean? Was Selene speaking of the curse that had marked her? Before she could speak, Selene stepped toward the throne, her hands brushing the cold stone, and a sudden surge of magic filled the room. Alara gasped as the temperature dropped, the air thickening with power. The storm outside responded to Selene's will, the wind howling louder and the sky flickering with dark light. Alara watched in awe, yet fear swirled in her gut. There was power in the Luna's movements, power that felt ancient, dangerous, and intoxicating. "You have power too," Selene murmured, her voice softer now, almost a whisper. "But you do not yet know how to wield it." Alara's pulse raced, but she said nothing, afraid that any words might shatter the fragile connection between them. She didn't understand what Selene meant, but she knew that her life, her fate, had somehow become intertwined with the Lunas in ways that went far beyond mere servitude. Later that night, Alara stood alone in her chamber, staring out the small window at the moon. The glow of it was soft and silent, a reminder of the kingdom's ruler and the woman whose power bound them both. Alara's curse had always been a silent thing, a weight on her shoulders that she couldn't escape. But now she felt something different, something new. Her reflection in the glass seemed unfamiliar to her. The same pale skin, the same dark eyes, but there was a flicker of something else, something inside her that had awakened. Could it be that she, too, could wield the power of the throne? The thought was absurd. She was a servant, a lowly servant in the eyes of the Luna. Yet the prophecy whispered in the dark corners of the kingdom spoke of two figures who would share the power of the throne, one to rule and one to stand by their side. Alara had always dismissed it as a myth. But the more she thought about it, the more she wondered if it could be true. Her heart, however, felt another tug. Was it possible? Could she, someone meant to kneel, ever truly stand beside Selene? Just as she turned away from the window, a soft knock echoed from her door. Alara's breath caught and she quickly smoothed her tunic before calling, "Come in." The door creaked open and a figure stepped into the room, their silhouette barely visible in the dim light. It was Selene. "Alara," she said, her voice soft but firm. "You are not to leave this room tonight. The storm outside is dangerous and I need you here close to me." Alara nodded, her heart racing. She tried to mask her surprise, but it was impossible. The Luna had come to her room, not as a queen giving orders, but as something else, something Alara couldn't yet define. "Of course, Your Majesty," Alara replied, her voice barely above a whisper. Selene's gaze held hers for a moment longer than necessary, and Alara felt the weight of that gaze pressing on her chest. There was something in Selene's eyes now, something that wasn't there before, a flicker of understanding perhaps, or was it something more? As the Luna turned to leave, Alara's heart clenched. The storm outside raged louder, but in the silence between them a new storm began to form, one neither of them could control. Cliffhanger. As Selene reached the door, she paused, her back to Alara. "You will kneel before the throne, Alara," she said quietly. "But you will also rise, do not forget that." With that, she vanished into the night, leaving Alara alone in the silence of her own heart. The kingdom of Eloria lay under a blanket of stars, the pale light of the moon casting shadows that seemed to stretch forever. Inside the grand palace, the air was thick with the smell of incense, the silence broken only by the occasional whisper of a servant or the creak of the old stone walls. But inside the throne room, the tension was palpable, like a storm waiting to break. Alara stood by the grand windows, her back straight, her hands clasped in front of her. She had been summoned by Selene, the Luna, to stand in her presence once again. It had been days since their strange encounter in Alara's chamber, and the air between them was charged with something neither of them could deny. Alara tried to ignore the feeling that had begun to stir in her heart, the pull she felt whenever Selene's eyes lingered on her. It was not just the power that radiated from the Luna, though that was a force in itself, but something deeper, something that threatened to unravel the careful walls Alara had built around her emotions. Selene was seated upon the throne, her eyes gazing out at the moon. The glow of the silver light framed her face, making her appear both otherworldly and distant. Her expression was unreadable, as always, but there was a flicker in her eyes when she turned her gaze to Alara. It was as if she could see something within her that no one else could. "Alara," Selene's voice was soft but commanding, pulling Alara from her thoughts. "Come closer." Alara's heart skipped a beat, but she did as she was told, moving towards the throne with careful steps. She kept her eyes lowered, but the weight of Selene's gaze pressed against her skin, making it hard to breathe. When she finally stood before the Luna, the room seemed to grow colder, the silence stretching between them like a fragile thread. "I have seen you, Alara," Selene said, her voice low, almost a whisper. "I see something in you that I have not seen in anyone else. Your power, it is not like mine. It is something older, something buried." Alara felt a chill crawl up her spine. Her curse, the one that had bound her to this throne, had always been a secret she tried to ignore. She had never told anyone about the strange magic that flowed through her veins, nor did she understand it. But Selene, she seemed to know. "I don't understand, Your Majesty," Alara replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "What do you mean?" Selene leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. "You are not like the others. You have been marked by something ancient. The curse that binds you is not a punishment, Alara. It is a gift." Alara's heart raced. The words echoed in her mind, but she couldn't comprehend them. A gift. How could something that kept her in servitude be a gift? Selene stood from the throne, her movements graceful but filled with purpose. She walked towards Alara, closing the distance between them. The air between them seemed to hum with power. "The curse you carry binds you to me," Selene continued, "but it also binds you to this throne. It connects you to the magic that flows through this palace, through this kingdom. You are more than you believe." Alara took a step back, her pulse quickening. She had always known there was something different about her, something she couldn't explain. But to be connected to the throne, to Selene herself, was a thought that frightened her. She had spent her life kneeling before the Luna, obeying her every command. How could she possibly share in that power? But as Alara met Selene's gaze, she saw something there, a flicker of vulnerability, of understanding. It was as if Selene was not just the queen commanding her kingdom, but a woman who, too, had been shaped by forces beyond her control. "You have power," Selene said again, her voice barely a breath, "and I can help you unlock it, but you must trust me." Alara hesitated. Trust? How could she trust someone who had caused her so much pain, who had treated her as nothing more than a servant? And yet there was something in Selene's eyes, a truth that Alara could not deny. "I don't know if I can," Alara whispered, her voice cracking with the weight of her words. "How can I trust someone who has only ever seen me as less than nothing?" Selene's expression softened, her eyes no longer cold and distant. "I have never seen you as nothing," she said, her voice surprisingly gentle. "You are more than a servant. You are a part of something greater, something I cannot understand fully yet. But together we can uncover it." Alara's heart was torn. Part of her wanted to push Selene away, to deny the pull she felt toward her, to refuse to be a part of whatever dark magic she was offering. But another part of her, a part she couldn't ignore, wanted to know the truth. She wanted to understand the power that stirred within her, the magic that had always been a part of her but had never been fully realized. "I don't know if I can," Alara repeated, but this time the words held less conviction. There was something in Selene's presence that made it impossible to deny her offer, something that made Alara wonder if, perhaps, this was the key to her own freedom. Selene reached out, her fingers brushing Alara's arm, sending a jolt of warmth through her body. Alara flinched at the touch, but the warmth lingered, filling the space between them. "You will learn to wield your power, Alara," Selene said, her voice low and almost comforting. "But you must learn to control it, and to do that you must learn to trust me." "I cannot do this alone." Alara's thoughts swirled. This was not the Luna she had known, the cold, unfeeling ruler who seemed to control everything with ease. This Selene was different. She was offering something more than power. She was offering a bond, a shared understanding, a connection. "I don't know what this means," Alara said quietly, her voice barely audible, "but I will try." Selene's gaze softened, and for a moment it was as if the weight of the entire world had lifted from her shoulders. "That is all I ask." But just as Alara began to feel a sense of calm, a cold gust of wind swept through the room, the candles flickering violently. The magic that had been building between them suddenly snapped, and Alara's knees buckled, her body collapsing onto the cold stone floor. Selene reached out to catch her, her hands steady and strong. But Alara could feel the strength draining from her body, her vision blurring. She tried to speak, but the words wouldn't come. All she could do was stare into Selene's eyes, feeling the weight of the Luna's power pressing down on her. Alara, Selene's voice was sharp with concern, her fingers brushing Alara's cheek. What's happening? The darkness seemed to rise around them, the shadows in the room stretching as though alive. Alara felt her body grow weaker, the magic inside her beginning to surge uncontrollably. I don't know, Alara gasped. Something is wrong. Selene's eyes narrowed as she glanced toward the shadows, her expression hardening. Alurin, she muttered, her voice filled with a quiet fury. He's making his move. Alara's mind spun, but before she could ask what Selene meant, a voice rang out from the shadows. Ah, the Luna and her little pet, the voice sneered. You're too late. Alara's vision swam, and before the darkness claimed her completely, she felt Selene's arms around her, holding her close as the world went black. Cliffhanger. As the darkness consumed them both, Alara heard a whisper in her ear, one that sent a shiver down her spine. You will kneel, Alara. You will kneel before the throne, or everything will be lost. The wind howled outside, rattling the windows of the ancient palace. It was as though the kingdom itself was aware of the tension that had gripped its heart, its ruler, and the one who had been marked by destiny. Inside, the palace was dark and quiet, save for the soft flicker of candlelight that seemed to tremble in the wake of the storm. Alara awoke in her chamber, her body aching from the strange and sudden fainting spell she had suffered. The darkness that had overtaken her was still fresh in her mind, but the feeling of Selene's arms around her, the warmth of the Luna's touch, lingered like a dream. Her head spun as she tried to sit up, but the weakness in her limbs made her fall back against the bed. There was a heaviness in the air, a sense that something was wrong, but Alara couldn't quite place it. She tried to push herself to her feet, but her legs were unsteady, her body still recovering from the magic that had surged through her. The door to her room opened, and a figure stepped inside. Selene. The Luna looked as composed as ever, her black cloak flowing around her like liquid darkness. But there was something different about her eyes, something that betrayed the calm exterior she tried to maintain. There was fear there, fear that Alara had not seen before. Alara, Selene said, her voice softer than usual. You're awake. Alara nodded, though her voice was still weak. What happened? The darkness. I've never felt anything like it. Selene's gaze softened, but her eyes were still filled with that quiet urgency. It was Alurin. He has begun his plan. The magic inside you, the curse that binds you to me, is not just a simple spell. It's part of something far larger, something I can no longer control. Alara frowned, confusion clouding her thoughts. Alurin, what does he want with me? Selene's expression hardened. He seeks to use you, Alara. You are the key to a weapon far older than this kingdom, a weapon that could destroy everything, including me. Alara's heart raced. A weapon. What was Selene talking about? She had always known there was something strange about her, something in her bloodline that made her different. But she had never imagined that it was connected to something so powerful, so dangerous. What do you mean, the key? Alara asked, her voice trembling. What weapon? Selene stepped closer, her eyes locked on Alara's with a mixture of sadness and fear. The throne, she whispered. The power of the Luna is tied to an ancient weapon, one that was created long before either of us were born. It's the heart of this kingdom, the source of all its magic. But the weapon is not meant to be wielded by just one person. The magic that runs through you and me is connected to it, and if we are not careful, it could tear everything apart. Alara's mind raced, the pieces of the puzzle beginning to fit together. She was the key to some kind of ancient weapon, and Alurin, the kingdom's general, had somehow learned of this connection. But why? Why would he want to use her for something so terrible? I don't understand, Alara said, shaking her head. Why would Alurin want me? I'm just a servant, I have no power. Seleni's gaze softened, but there was no trace of pity in her eyes, only a hard, unwavering determination. You have more power than you realize, Alara. Your bloodline is older than mine. It is tied to the throne, to the very magic that keeps this kingdom alive. If Alurin learns how to harness it, he will have the power to overthrow me and everything we've built here. Alara felt a chill crawl up her spine. This was more than she could have ever imagined. She had always known she was different, but now she realized that her connection to Selene, the curse that had bound her to the throne, was part of something much larger, much more dangerous. We need to stop him, Alara said, her voice growing stronger despite the fear that threatened to overtake her. Selene nodded, her eyes filled with resolve. Yes, but to do that we must confront the truth. You are not just my servant, Alara, you are my equal. You are the one who can stand beside me on the throne. Together we can stop Alurin. Alara's heart raced. The idea of standing beside Selene, of sharing the throne, was both thrilling and terrifying. She had spent her life kneeling before the Luna, obeying her every command. But now Selene was offering her something different, an alliance, a partnership, a chance to wield the power that had always been just out of her reach. I don't know if I can, Alara whispered. I don't know if I'm strong enough. Selene reached out, placing a hand gently on Alara's shoulder. You are stronger than you think, and together we will face whatever comes. I won't let Alurin take this kingdom from us. For a moment, the two women stood in silence, the weight of their shared destiny settling between them. Alara could feel the power that surged in her veins, a power that had been dormant for so long, awakening in response to Selene's words. But as the silence stretched, a new feeling began to creep in. It was not just power that connected them, but something deeper, something that went beyond magic. Alara could feel it in the way their gazes locked, in the quiet understanding that passed between them. There was a bond here, a bond that neither of them could deny. Just as Alara opened her mouth to speak, a loud crash echoed through the palace. The walls trembled and the ground beneath them shook. Selene's eyes narrowed, and Alara felt a surge of panic. It's happening, Selene said, her voice cold with fear. Alurin has made his move. Without another word, Selene turned and rushed toward the door, motioning for Alara to follow. Alara scrambled to her feet, her legs still unsteady, but the urgency in Selene's voice pushed her forward. They made their way through the halls, the sound of crashing and shouting growing louder as they approached the center of the palace. Alara could feel the power in the air, the magic that was both terrifying and beautiful. The storm outside raged harder, as if the very elements were responding to the chaos within the palace. As they reached the throne room, the doors burst open, revealing Alurin standing in the center of the room with a cruel smile on his face. His eyes flicked to Selene, and then to Alara before he spoke. So the Luna and her little servant have finally come to face me, Alurin sneered. How predictable. Alara's heart pounded in her chest. This was it, the moment they had feared. Alurin was here, and he was ready to take control of the kingdom. Why do you seek to destroy everything? Selene demanded, her voice cold and commanding. What is it that you want, Alurin? Alurin's smile widened, a dark glint in his eyes. Power, of course. The power to rule this kingdom, the power that belongs to me. And with Alara's magic I will be unstoppable. Alara stepped forward, her hands trembling but her voice steady. You won't win, Alurin. We will stop you. Alurin laughed, the sound echoing through the room. You are naive, Alara. You don't understand the power you possess. But soon you will. Before Alara could respond, Alurin raised his hand and a surge of dark magic blasted toward them. Selene quickly raised her own hands, blocking the attack, but the force of it knocked her back, sending her crashing into the throne. Alara, Selene gasped, her breath coming in ragged gasps. It's time. We must do this together. Alara felt the magic within her rise, the power that had always been a part of her now thrumming through her veins. She closed her eyes, focusing on the bond that had formed between her and Selene. The power of the throne, the magic that connected them, surged in response to her call. Together, they stood against Alurin, ready to face the storm that was about to break. Cliffhanger, as Alara and Selene prepared to fight, Alurin's smile faded, replaced by an expression of pure malice. "You think you can stop me?" he hissed. "We'll see how long your precious bond lasts." The throne room had become a battlefield. The once grand space, filled with light and beauty, was now dark and twisted by the forces that clashed within it. The air was thick with magic, charged with the power of Selene, Alara, and Alurin. The storm outside raged, shaking the walls of the palace, as if the entire kingdom was holding its breath. Alara stood beside Selene, her heart pounding, her body still trembling from the dark magic Alurin had unleashed. She had never felt such a weight of power before, not even when she had first realized the curse that bound her to the throne. But now, standing with Selene, she felt something greater, something that filled her with fear and wonder all at once. "You can feel it, can't you?" Selene's voice was low but steady. Her eyes were focused on Alurin, who stood across the room with a wicked grin on his face. "The power that binds us all. The throne, it is not just a seat of power. It is a weapon." Alara nodded, but her throat was tight with the realization of what Selene was saying. The throne, the very thing that had kept her bound to the Luna, was also the source of unimaginable power. And now, it was the battleground where everything would either be saved or destroyed. Alurin laughed, his voice echoing off the stone walls. "You think you can stop me? You who were made to kneel, and you, Luna, who clings to a dying throne. You are nothing against me." His magic swirled around him like a storm, black tendrils of dark energy reaching toward them. Alara felt it, the pull of it, the way it tried to tear away her control. Her heart raced, and for a moment she thought she might falter. But then she felt Selene's presence beside her, steady and unwavering. "We are not alone," Selene murmured, her voice cutting through Alara's fear. "We are bound to this throne. Together we will stand." Alara's chest tightened. She could feel it then, the bond between them, the connection that tied her to Selene and the throne. It was not just a curse anymore. It was their strength. It was their destiny. With a deep breath, Alara stepped forward, raising her hands in front of her. The power within her surged, stronger than she had ever felt it before. The room seemed to hum with magic, and the air around her crackled as she focused her energy. "You're wrong, Alurin," she said, her voice clear, cutting through the chaos. "You may think you control the throne, but you don't understand it. You don't understand us." Selene stepped forward too, her eyes blazing with power. "Together, we will reclaim what is ours, and you will fall, Alurin." Alurin's eyes narrowed, and with a growl, he thrust his hands forward, sending a blast of dark magic toward them. It was a force like no other, filled with hatred and power that seemed to tear at the very fabric of the palace. Alara raised her hands instinctively, feeling the magic within her rise in response. A barrier of light formed in front of them, shining brightly as it absorbed the dark magic. The force of it pushed her back, but she stood firm, her feet planted on the stone floor. Beside her, Selene's power flared, stronger than ever. The two women, bound by magic and fate, combined their strength. The throne had always been their shared power, their connection, and now it was their weapon. "Alurin," Selene shouted, "you cannot control this. This throne was never meant for one. You cannot take it alone." For a moment, Alurin seemed to hesitate, confusion flickering across his face. He had underestimated them, underestimated the bond that had been forged between Alara and Selene, the very thing that made them stronger together. Alara pushed forward, gathering every ounce of power she had. She could feel the throne's magic flowing through her now, like a river of energy that surged beneath her skin. She felt Selene's presence beside her, their magic intertwined, their hearts beating in time. The storm outside seemed to match the rising power inside the room. With a sharp cry, Alara released the magic she had been holding, sending a wave of light crashing toward Alurin. The force of it knocked him off his feet, sending him flying backward. His eyes widened with disbelief as he struggled to rise, but the damage was done. The throne, the magic, the bond they shared had defeated him. Alurin snarled as he picked himself up, but Alara could see the fear in his eyes now. He had lost control. He had underestimated the power of the bond between the Luna and the one who was meant to stand beside her. "You cannot win," Alara said, her voice strong now, filled with the power of the throne. "You are nothing without the throne, and we will never let you have it." Alurin's expression twisted with rage, and for a moment it seemed as though he might attack again. But then he stopped, his shoulders slumping. This was never supposed to happen," he muttered, almost to himself. "I was supposed to be the one to rule." But before he could act, Selene stepped forward, her gaze cold and unyielding. "You will never rule this kingdom, Alurin. You have no place here. The throne is not yours to claim." With a final, almost resigned look, Alurin turned and fled, his dark magic fading as he disappeared into the shadows of the palace. The room fell silent, the storm outside beginning to calm as if the kingdom itself was taking a breath. Alara's body trembled from the surge of magic she had just unleashed, but she felt a sense of peace settle within her. It was over. Alurin had been defeated, but it wasn't just the battle that had ended. Something had shifted between her and Selene. The bond that had once been only a curse was now something more. It was their strength, their connection, their shared power. Alara turned to Selene, her heart pounding in her chest. The woman who had once been her ruler, her tormentor, was now something more. They had fought side by side, their magic intertwined, and in that moment Alara realized something she hadn't been able to admit before. She loved Selene. Not just as a ruler, not just as someone she was bound to by curse and fate, but as someone she could stand beside, someone who saw her as more than just a servant. Selene met her gaze, her eyes softening for the first time in a long while. "We did it," she whispered. "Together." Alara nodded, her heart full. Together. The throne, the seat of power, had always been meant for two, and now it was theirs to rule together. They were no longer bound by the curse. They were bound by something stronger, love, loyalty, and a shared destiny. As they stood there in the heart of the kingdom they had both fought to protect, Alara knew that their journey was just beginning. The throne had bent, but it had not broken, and neither would they. Cliffhanger. As the two women stood in the quiet aftermath, the shadows of the room seemed to shift once more. A soft voice echoed from the darkness. "This is only the beginning, Luna," it said, sending a chill through the room. "You cannot hide from what is coming.